Welcome to Let's Talk Possibility, episode 44 on the 27th of August, 2012. Tonight we're talking to Gareth Ochse and Paul Smith about how to become a high-growth entrepreneur. Thanks for listening. What's possible when we explore ideas, challenge thinking, and inspire action? Welcome to Let's Talk Possibility. I'm your host, Talana Simpson, and with me is co-host, Chris Dykes.
Good evening, everybody.
We want to talk tonight about the Richard Bransons, the Adrian Gores, those Oprahs, the Steve Jobs, those kind of people in the world, the true entrepreneurs, and that they've created high growth and big impact businesses. Is there a science to what they did? Do they have qualities, skill sets, and mindsets that can be learned by others wanting to follow their footprints? So with us, we have an entrepreneur, deal maker, and finance guy, Gareth Ochse.
Hello.
Who's actually today just launched his second business, Valuation Up. Just went live today. The other one being iSign.pro. And also we have Paul Smith, an entrepreneur, a researcher, and a lecturer. Hello. So we've got you guys here tonight because we want to know, you both know so much about high growth entrepreneurs. So maybe we just start there. How would you define an entrepreneur? Because it's a word that we use so often, and it goes, I think, everything from small business owners, self-employed person, to the likes of the Richard Bransons.
And perhaps sometimes you also get a bit glib about it and use it as more of an ego statement than a true reflection of the work that we do.
Sure. From my side, there's a big difference between how you started at Talana with the very high impact, big market guys that have made a lot of money versus someone who's self-employed effectively and stays at home. And I have that question quite a lot. People ask how they can use financial tools, for example, in helping themselves as a stay-at-home self-employed person, and all they've really done is shift out of the corporate. They've become a feeder to the corporate system. They have to serve someone. But until they're growing that business substantially, before they're building an asset of value in the business itself, they're merely self-employed. And when they're entrepreneurs, they're at the sort of bottom feeding part of it. And it's quite different.
So what is an entrepreneur then? Anyone who creates work for themselves?
Yeah, creates work for themselves, independently of another structure, of a corporate structure. So they're not employed by someone, right? I think that's the key thing. They're employed by themselves.
Or they own the business.
They own the business. They own a business. They don't necessarily have to start a business. They can just own it, you know. But for me, there's a really key mind shift between being self-employed and deciding to grow a business that becomes valuable. And in my mind, the entrepreneurs are the people who are growing the businesses, as opposed to being self-employed.
And Paul, I mean, you researched this area of entrepreneurship for
being an academic, obviously there's a lot of debate. And in fact, there was a study done by one of the other students at University of Pretoria where they went and counted up all the different definitions given by researchers on entrepreneurship, and he gave up after 200 definitions. So there are a million different definitions. So I just prefer to say, okay, let's use the appropriate definition for what we're trying to achieve with the study that you're doing. But I mean, obviously you get the one definition is someone who's actually starting a business, and then the other definition is then how many other people they're employing, or what's the actual turnover, or whether they're actually building an organization, exactly like Gareth was saying. So you can obviously then define it a number of different ways. Is it someone who employs 20 people or grows at a certain percentage on an annual basis, or someone who lists a company or mergers? So there are a whole bunch of different definitions, but I think what Gareth was saying about, I would say the core, it's really an entrepreneur either is a growth entrepreneur or someone who's maybe just a lifestyle entrepreneur who's just in the business, maybe employing 2 or 3 people, but no real plans to take over the world or build an organization.
So the growth entrepreneur is the one that's going to take over the world.
Correct, yeah.
You can't overtake anyone unless you're growing. You know, growth is the fundamental driver of value. Without a growth rate that's higher than inflation or higher than your competitors, you're nowhere. So by definition, the people that we kind of look up to, the people that you read about in the press and the net, are the people who've grown at phenomenal rates.
So can you be a high growth entrepreneur but not employ a whole lot of people? Maybe just a couple? Or
those are generally called pyramid schemes.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting just from the data side. There's a really high correlation between employee growth and then actual sales growth. Obviously, you might get the VC who raises a huge fund and makes a huge amount of cash with obviously only a far smaller employment contingent. But those are really rare, that you're actually making big turnovers with very few employees.
Perhaps if you take somebody like the Mark Shuttleworth of this world who've developed something really special, and they're going to sell that, but they're not necessarily building a business, they're just selling a product. And so one questions whether they would be a high growth entrepreneur.
No, I mean, Mark Shuttleworth's a fascinating example because he did grow a business and he grew it very quickly. He was also very, very lucky. And that's, when you think about the big names you mentioned at the start of the show, the single word for me that springs out of all of those guys is luck.
Sure.
Like, they've been at the right place at the right time. They've had incredible skills. They've had incredible, brave. They've been very brave. They've gone out for stuff. They've been aggressive, but they've also been incredibly lucky.
Sure.
And Shuttleworth was no different. He had, for all that he's done since to prove that he can do it again, which is fantastic, he built secure socket layer stuff with high encryption that at the time the US government had laws preventing from any of their own companies within the US exporting that kind of technology. So the only way you could do it elsewhere in the world was to have a third-party provider. And Netscape went to Shuttleworth and said, can you do this? Well, they asked for tenders and he had built something. So he had the right time and the technology, but he was only able to get into Netscape and be dominant like that because of this law. And then what happened when the law changed, VeriSign bought him out straight away.
Sure.
They had to. And because of that, at the right time, again, late, early 2000, he made an absolute killing. 6 months later, that deal would have been worth a fraction. And in fact, a year later, Verizon took $1 billion write-down on the deal. So it's timing, it's luck, but you've got to be there.
Timing, luck.
Yeah, and having the skills and stuff.
So you said the skills, you said also bravery. Are there anything else that you
Well, I was just thinking there on the whole luck thing. Firstly, a Harvard professor did a really interesting study. They looked at 9,000 VC deals, and they looked at how well someone who had previously listed a company. So there's a guy who starts a business, gets funded, lists, and then has another opportunity to get funded again. Only 33% of the people it was 30% of the people who did it the first time could do it the second time. So there's obviously there's a 60% element or 70% element of luck, which is really interesting. So it's a huge part of entrepreneurship, I think.
Of course, the cynical person in me thinks about Gary Player and his famous statement: "The harder I practice, the luckier I get."
So it keeps me going.
Well, there's a really great concept that Jim Collins has come up with called return on luck.
Yeah.
And what he did is in his latest study book, Great by Choice, where he looked at the Intels and compared them with the comparison companies and the Apples and the Microsofts, and found that what would happen with the comparison companies which didn't do as well as so they would take two companies in the same market, and the companies that did exceptionally well, when they had a lucky event, they would capitalize on the luck. So, for example, when Intel got a lucky break, they would capitalize on, and then, for example, AMD had some lucky break, but they messed it up by not being able to ship the chips on time. So it was interesting that when the luck came, they actually took advantage of it, where the guys who don't do well, they had that lucky event and they just let the opportunity pass by them.
Oh, that's fascinating.
If you read, the other Jim Collins, he's just fantastic. The Good to Greats and Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers, I think, defined the luck for me. If you look at Ellison, Gates, those guys, and even Steve Jobs, they were born within a few years of each other. They went to universities where computer science departments had decentralized terminals. They were up there at night booking their slots at 2 a.m. They were working hard, they were bright, they were smart. But if they were born 5 years earlier, they never had the technology exposure when they were young. If they were born 5 years later, the market had already happened. So it is a right time and place thing.
So if it's the right time and place, then can you actually predict an entrepreneur's success?
Paul?
On an individual level, yeah, well. What was actually quite interesting, again, from that study I mentioned earlier, the Gromper study by the Harvard professor, is they found that VC funded, of the fundings that they looked at, that 1 in 5 people that they funded ended up listed or sold out successfully. So what we're saying is that the VCs in their sample were not bad. If you're getting it 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 chances, you're doing okay. So there's obviously some element of prediction, but I think to predict it with 100% accuracy, we'll never get that. But we could just say there's a probability. Like if you're in this group, you've previously started successful businesses, or you've got a round of funding, you've got the right experience, you've got a good cohesive team, then you've got obviously a higher chance than someone who's starting a business for the first time, alone, no cash, no experience.
But of course, the other side of it is what would define the success, which is something that we were talking a little bit earlier. And whether it's the Richard Bransons of this world or the average the Joe Schmo who might be turning over R1 million, R2 million, and R3 million profit, or dollars for that matter. But of course, if you take the 1 in 5 success, maybe the other 2 guys have broken even. And so you might say that that's quite an interesting, it would skew the stats of how successful they've been.
Chris, I want to turn it on its head. Rather than talk about defining success, because I think it's a piece of string in many ways.
Sure.
Let's talk about defining failure.
Absolutely.
And talk about failure rates. So, this is something I'm really, really trying to address in my life. If you look at U.S. Department of Labor stats, basically 66% of new businesses fail within 4 years, right?
And failed being that they're
gone.
absolutely
They're out.
bankrupt.
They've lost all the capital.
Sure.
That's the most important point. Is they've lost all the capital.
Okay.
The failure rate at 2 years is about 44%. So. Roughly, you've got 3 years to flip a coin, and in that coin flip, if it comes down, you've either failed already, or you're most likely to fail in the next 5 years. Because by 10 years, 99%, 95% have failed, right?
Yeah.
So when you look at what's succeeded, it means they've built value, they've survived over that longer period. Now, probably generally means in the time that someone's grown, they've assimilated other companies or been sold into something. The kind of stuff that we like to hear about in the popular media, the kind of entrepreneurial success stories, the Peter Thiels, the Facebooks, that kind of stuff, these are very, very rare events. A fund, Paul, you mentioned the 4 out of 10 kind of choice where the guys actually make some money. The VC funding stuff I've seen that's quite interesting is that how few VC funds actually return the capital back to the limited partners. And VC as an asset class has been really underperforming in the last 10 years. Now, this is largely US-based data because that's where most of the VC money is. But from my understanding, as an asset class, it's been very poor because these guys haven't been able to find enough investors, enough people to make enough returns to return the cash, less the management fees back to the limited partners who invested in it. I don't know if you've seen those.
No, so that study, what the definition they were using is that because they were using the definition, did the business list or successfully sell?
Right.
So it was just either 0 to 1. Okay. So they weren't looking at returns or anything. So you could have listed and actually not made any money.
Done a Groupon or a Facebook.
Yeah, like a Groupon.
Or a Manchester United for that matter.
Yeah. Scary stuff. So the first thing for me as an entrepreneur is not failing. And because the failure rates are so high, the thing I always worry about is people who kind of bet the farm. And there's lovely popular stories again, of people who put all their money into venture and they kind of hock themselves and they survive and somehow they make it. And these are the stories that get told because they're great stories and we like to sort of support the winner. But 99% of people who try that end up in debt counseling and end up with a poor credit record for life, and they never become an entrepreneur again because they just can't.
And to boot, divorced and children that have discommunicated them.
Yeah, children that haven't eaten to stay alive. No, I mean it's horrendous. So I really caution people against betting the farm until you've got this one kind of opportunity where you really believe and see the data that customers are buying and that you've cracked a problem. At that stage, it's as one of the great books I read about the guys who started CD Baby. The guy just said, if it doesn't feel easy, you're not doing the right thing. Like if customers aren't phoning you asking for features or aren't buying a product at the price you want, do something else because it's too hard. It's hard enough as it is when people want it.
Yeah, there was an awesome study done by a lady, Sar Savathi at Darden College, where what she did is she went and interviewed 27 entrepreneurs who were like Uber entrepreneurs. So they had all started and listed a company. On average, it started 20 businesses, And I think the smallest company was doing about a $200 million turnover, and the biggest one was doing $6 billion turnover. So they're really, really good entrepreneurs. And what they found is they did a 17-page questionnaire where these entrepreneurs had to make the decisions of starting a business. And then recorded as they thought out loud as they made the decisions, where they found that sort of doing that process is kind of like modeling how these people think. And they found what was interesting, even though obviously these guys were uber wealthy, all of them tried to put as little into the business as possible. And as a result, you came up with the term of affordable loss, where because you're playing in uncertain markets, businesses fail, that's the reality, that you always want to upfront define what is the loss, and can you take that loss? And if you can't, don't do the business. So it's really interesting turn that the most successful entrepreneurs actually think like this, exactly like Gareth was saying.
In fact, if you think, so many people say that entrepreneurs are risk takers. So many of the entrepreneurs I've met, and obviously they're not certainly not of the uber entrepreneurs you call them, are actually quite risk averse. And are not prepared to put as much on the table as we would traditionally think, given the sort of the stereotype that's often painted. So that kind of makes sense. And if you look at it across the spectrum, maybe that's an interesting trend.
Well, it was interesting because initially they thought that when they started the research that they looked at risk-taking as like a positive predictor. So when this research came out about the whole affordable loss thing, a team of people got together and they did something called a meta-analysis, where they combine all the studies together that have been done on entrepreneurs and literally looked at maybe 10 or 50 or 100 studies, and then literally tens of thousands of entrepreneurs, and actually found that there's a slight negative correlation between the propensity to take risk and the performance of the business. So it actually, like you're saying, risk minimization actually is related to success, not failure.
Sure. So it's a calculated risk.
Sorry, Tarana. I think it kind of taps into your earlier point about being able to capitalize on unlucky opportunities. So my point of this is that if you're not taking everything that comes your way, you're keeping some powder dry. When something comes your way that gives you a strategic foothold or immediate advantage, and you can throw resources at it, you get an incredible gain for the least amount of effort.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just taking everything that comes in your thing and you're continually spending cash on it, that's it. You have very limited strategic flexibility.
Absolutely.
So I think guys who've got a lower risk tolerance hold their money back, see something good and juicy they've analysed, and they know exactly what to do on it because they've kind of got this institutional capacity to act because they've got that spare capacity.
If you've been plugging away and you've got a whole bunch of business experience and almost intuition about how the market's going to respond and what the need of your customers are, and if you link it into the probability that ultimately we're going to make a bad decision at some point, and if we're keeping our risk mitigated, well, if keeping our investment low to guard against that probability, it's kind of a recipe that seems to be that would work. So in other words, I don't know if that made sense, but in other words, if you've got the flexibility and you're mitigating your risk if things do go wrong, it gives you the power to act. Yeah, I think we said that twice.
So if you can predict a level of success, and it sounds like you can, so like you've been saying, there's certain characteristics, there's certain strategies you can put in place, then can you actually teach people to become high growth entrepreneurs? Can you teach someone to become the next Richard Branson?
So, all right, I'll be brave here and go out and limit my own views. My view is you can teach people to become better entrepreneurs. There's an attitudinal thing that says you want to solve a problem, and solving a problem and serving a great big market of people who have that problem, you can in theory solve that problem, take away their pain at a price. That's the start of an entrepreneurial venture for me. The bigger the market, the bigger the potential. You can certainly teach and advise people how to address that problem. There's a number of tools, there's a number of frameworks, there's a number of modeling techniques where you can walk them through the path of not blowing all their fortune on the first website they build, which I've done many times. So I don't think you can necessarily teach someone to be a great entrepreneur, but you can certainly expose them to what they shouldn't be doing, and the ones that are pretty good will learn from that. But predicting someone when they walk in the room whether they're going to be great or not, I wouldn't be good at that.
Yeah, well, just from the sort of the research side, we've been trying to identify as sort of a research community the entrepreneurial personality for about 40 years now, and there's still the ones, we haven't been able to do it. There's no sort of psychometric test that we can show that this is related to performance. However, we have found, there's a theory we call human capital theory, where if you build up the correct amount of human capital and experiences, it significantly increases your chance of success. So I'll just give you a practical example. If you take an employee who has maybe started at Microsoft and been involved in new product development at Microsoft for maybe 20 years, or done a whole bunch of products from age 20 to 40, and now he teams up with a finance guy and maybe a sort of the visionary type entrepreneur, and then you've got the same type of person who's maybe had the same job in industry, which maybe the restaurant industry, and then he teams up with a few friends who don't have that high level of skill. With obviously the people who have the chap at Microsoft is going to have a much higher chance of success than the same age person who hasn't really acquired all those experiences in the right field to succeed. So there's definitely a way you can differentiate who's going to succeed and also prepare people. So I would say you can significantly alter a person's chance of success over a period of time if you give them the right experiences.
So essentially the right experience, because you're saying learning from experience. I mean,
I'm
you've
saying
had
learning from adversity.
You've
It's a rough
had
world.
some companies that didn't work or did work, and some that are still going.
That
So what's
sort of sums it up.
your best learning, it sounds like, has been from the actual experience?
Yeah, I think Paul and I share a view that the lean startup movement, where you basically get out into the market as quickly as you can, where you launch something, you get feedback, you iterate, you strive to achieve product market fit. When you've nailed that problem, then you worry about scaling it. Until then, there's no point in throwing further cash at the problem, because you just waste it. In my life, I've achieved that product market fit once or twice. We've run out of money before and after at times. That's unrelated. There's definitely a very scientific approach to startups that entrepreneurs can follow that reduces their risk. Certainly when it reduces their risk, it might mean they fail much faster, but they at least have tested the hypothesis of what their business could be with less capital wasted. And that means that they've got their friends and family who probably back them, still have cash for the next one. They might have cash for the next one. And they also haven't taken 3 or 4 years out of their life to get an answer which is a no, which is hell of important. Because you've got to be able to get these answers quickly and learn from them and iterate. Most of these guys, most successful entrepreneurs, are around 40. I believe.
That's really, I think, a big myth. There's a lot of people, obviously, because they focus on the Zuckerbergs and the Gates and the dropouts. There are a lot of myths around entrepreneurship, I think, and very much it's, if you actually had to back a 20-year-old or a 40-year-old, choose the 40-year-old every time. They've got a much higher chance of success just because they've had the experience to learn how to do it, you know?
They've been married, so they've dealt with adversity.
And finance, I know that's something you teach and you write about, is finance. So you think, is that one of the things that someone should learn, that wants to be an entrepreneur?
For sure. So I mentioned the failure rates earlier, and there was more research that said to entrepreneurs what failed them, where did they fail, what were the skills they didn't have. And the one study that I read said 85% of the entrepreneurs felt that a lack of financial knowledge and understanding was one of the failures. Now, obviously everyone thinks cash flow is king and you've got to understand cash flow, but in my experience dealing with entrepreneurs, now we're not necessarily talking software entrepreneurs, we're talking people who buy a restaurant, we're talking people who run car washes, whatever the definition is. A lot of guys don't actually understand how income statements, balance sheets work. They're terrified by them. These are concepts with numbers and its own language and stuff, and they never develop the skills. And I try and help this issue, try and solve this problem for entrepreneurs by teaching them how to look at the business from a valuation perspective, from how to looking at it as a whole. Very visually, we use a DuPont framework that ties together income statement, balance sheet, and it filters through to evaluation, so they can understand how a decision they make now on a dividend they might want to pay themselves could be instant cash in the bank or delayed gratification to a higher valuation. And that's their choice. And when they start to understand that stuff and play with it, then this thing comes alive. And it's not having to go through an accounts 101 lecture. It's about playing with the actual finances and understanding how cash comes in and goes out and where the bank... It's really a question of delayed gratitude more than anything else. That's the financing decision. So I feel very strongly about it. I love finance, and I see the difference it makes in people's lives. And as a case in point, I have a friendly restaurant, guys who've come on the course and they turned down an offer in the beginning of the year and have opened their second shop now. And all of that's because they were able to sweat assets a little bit better that they didn't realize they could sweat better. So these lights come on and entrepreneurs are coachable, which is quite nice.
Maybe
Coachable, they're open to learning.
Paul, just to get back to the point you were saying about when we were first talking about incubators, and there's a question of whether an incubator adds value or not, which ultimately is what we're asking now about whether an entrepreneur can learn or can be taught to be successful. And the big question is, of course, are the entrepreneurs successful because of the incubator, or is the incubator successful because they've chosen the right entrepreneurs? And perhaps it comes down to the University of Life as opposed to the University of Learning.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of the incubators give a lot of things to the entrepreneurs which would definitely increase their chance of success. So if you maybe sort of the first time going into your first startup, and you then get assigned a mentor at the incubator who's been through 5 or 6 or maybe even seen hundreds of startups, they're obviously, and you're actually going to take the advice, that's going to alter your success because you're going to be making better decisions. Also things like their networks, like some of the incubators, they'll have great networks that they can get you into for maybe your first couple of customers if you're looking to target the corporate market, or they've got people who can get you into the right place. They can obviously give you finance, and maybe also hold you accountable for certain deadlines. So I think if you look at the data, they do improve a startup's chances of success. However, are you going to it's just an interesting one whether the return on investment is good enough for all that help you're giving the startup. It's probably sort of an interesting question as we're speaking from the policy perspective.
So possibly the incubator needs the coach in the background as well.
Yeah, well, it's a very expensive way to help entrepreneurs, incubation.
Yeah.
So it does work, but it's really expensive if you're giving a person a lot of individual coaching and providing all this type of help.
We have a question that's just come in from Sir Steve, who's listening in. He asks, where do freelancers, artisans and cooperatives fit into the high growth concept? Anyone want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, until an artisan, a freelancer, an artist actually separates their personal finances from their business finances, and until they're basically growing an asset there that has its own structures and systems and other people in it, they're not going to get the high kind of growth we're talking about in an entrepreneurial venture. So someone might sell more, might do more, but any big artist gets to the stage where they incorporate or license or have teams of work behind them, particularly music industry. But no different really. The bigger bloggers are very systemized, structured and so on. But the artisan, if you're a good craftsman, you can make a very good income, but your wealth will come from how you invest that income. It won't come from your business per se. That's quite a difference for me. The entrepreneurs I worry about are the people where their wealth will come from the business that they're building and the asset that they're building in that business. Whereas a lot of artisans or self-employed people will generate high income and invest that wealth into stock markets or wherever else they put that. But their fundamental vehicle is not for wealth creation, is not their business. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very. I think it comes down to the whole working on your business versus working in your business, that type of thing. And it's interesting that they've done a lot of observation, or not a lot, a couple of observation studies, where they actually go and look what an entrepreneur does every day. Someone follows them around and say, okay, it's 5 minutes meeting, this amount of time emailing, talking to this type of person, and actually creating. We do these nutty studies.
I would be so best.
But I think what an artisan's doing will probably spend the majority of their time actually doing, when an entrepreneur is probably spending the majority of their time gathering assets in the beginning and seeking opportunities up front, and then turning into managing a team and then managing managers as the business grows on. Where I think the artisans stay more at the doing stage, where they actually do the craft, and then a little bit of time doing the business aspect of the business.
Perhaps a classic example, if you start looking at just within the medicinal field, a doctor, he has the knowledge unless he can get other doctors on board. It's always going to be just that doctor.
That's when you sell your.
And you might charge up your rates,
time.
but how else do you grow unless you start forming those collaborations and ultimately building an infrastructure?
But even a doctor, and I'll do some work in the medical markets, they're systemized. They've got 2 or 3 receptionists, they've got accounts people, they've got officers, they've got partners, they've got locums. There's a hell of a system to keep that going.
Yeah.
They even collaborate on rates. They compete with the medical aid schemes for how much they can take from someone. I mean, it's a very, very strong system. Whereas if you think of your average artist, and there's some guys that are friends of mine who are artists, they are beautiful people creating beautiful art that touches people, but they've got no real way of commercializing it. It's so much more luck involved. And that's the real thing. Some of those guys will do very well, but most of them will be below the breadline their entire lives.
Yeah.
Happy people, without a doubt, because of what they get out. But that's not how we measure it.
No.
You know.
So we're coming up to the end of the show now. And Gareth, just one way for someone to get hold of you?
Valuationup.com. If you send an info there or contact us, it'll get to me eventually.
Cool.
Cool, and
Thanks,
then
Paul.
you can just get me on my email, paulshawsmith@gmail.com. SHAW is the Shaw part, and it's Smith with an H.
Great, and you can obviously see more details about our guests on their profiles, which is on our blogs, and interact with us some more as well. If you have some ideas and comments on what you've heard tonight or want to ask some more questions, keep the conversation going on our Facebook page or tweet us on LT Possibility. I just want to sum up with one last thing, Gareth. I think it's just you've got a rocket as your logo for the valuation app.
That's
Why don't
right.
you just in a very short bit tell us why you chose a rocket?
Well, years ago I studied economics, and this is about 20 years ago. At that stage, the only people that could put rockets into space were governments. And more recently, you've seen Musk and Branson put their own rockets into space. So it's just an illustration of what's possible as an entrepreneur. You can start from zero, as both of those guys did, and you can literally compete with governments in the space race. And that's where I find a bit of inspiration. As lucky as those guys are.
Great. On that note, don't just think about it, go and do it.